some days I just want to lie in bed and watch TikTok. And there are things that I do where I don't want to be observed. You know, like he'll pop into the room and he's like, "Hey, TikTok girl." And I'm like, "Don't talk about it. I'm so ashamed of it."
Welcome to Chasing Chaos with Sheila Hamilton. Tonight's guest, author and former host of Live Wire Radio, Courtenay Hameister. Now, please welcome your host, Sheila Hamilton.
Hello and welcome to Chasing Chaos. I'm your host, Sheila Hamilton, and we're here to provide well-being tools, resources, and some genuine answers to take command of your life. And I am thrilled to introduce today's guest and learn how she's managing through the anxiety and the lasting effects of 2020. She's a writer, performer, teacher, editor, playwright, and phenomenal screenwriter. For 9 years, she was the host, head writer, and co-producer for Livewire, a nationally syndicated public radio variety show that records here in Portland, Oregon. And her memoir, Okay, Fine, Whatever, is the story of her attempt to become braver by spending 1 year doing all of the little things that scared her. Among those experiences, a fellatio class, an afternoon in a sensory deprivation tank, a session with a professional cuddler, and going on 28 first dates. Please welcome Courtenay Hameister. Courtenay, it is so good to see you. I'm so curious what music is getting you through COVID.
Well, there's a couple things. So the music that really calms me is Patty Griffin, anything by Patty Griffin. She's just a stunning, gorgeous songwriter, and her music is always really calming to me. So I tend to listen to her whenever I need that. But also, I've become addicted to TikTok during the pandemic, and the music on there is fantastic, you know. And so it's actually because I'm a woman of a certain age. I'm not down with the latest, Sheila. I'm generally not down, but when you listen to TikTok, you get to actually listen to all these amazing musicians in 1 minute or 15-second snippets. And so I have been listening to like Lizzo and, you know, just some of the newer artists. Just go to TikTok and you'll hear the same song over and over again until you can't possibly listen to it one more time.
Till it's memorized in your brain. Exactly. And shocking that the TikTok users were like, this Fleetwood Mac, who is this band and where do they play? And where can you hear them? Right? That was awesome. Yeah. I was just reading some statistics on anxiety right now, and 2/3 of Americans now report severe anxiety. And I was just curious if you could take us back to a story of when your anxiety was the most profound and describe what it was like in your body and in your behaviors.
I have generalized anxiety disorder, and that's sort of like a low buzzing anxiety that is kind of with you all the time. And that, I think, people who are experiencing anxiety now for COVID, who have never experienced it before, they can relate to what that feels like. I have also been diagnosed with OCD, and a lot of people think OCD is really just about compulsive behaviors like cleaning, washing your hands, that kind of thing. But OCD is really about intrusive thoughts, and so if someone is doing a lot of cleaning, those compulsions are actually a way to fight those intrusive thoughts, like there are germs everywhere, and they're going to kill me, so I have to wash my hands a bunch of times. Another issue, I think, right, with COVID is I'm sure people who have OCD in that way are really struggling. But you can also have just intrusive thoughts and not have any compulsions, and that's what I had. I tend to, and so I had harm OCD, where I was afraid that I had hurt someone or was going to hurt someone. And then I also had health fears, right? When you have anxiety, you tend to have brain fog. You have this increased amount of adrenaline and cortisol coursing through your system, and it makes you have difficulty a lot of times accessing words. And so because of that, I started obsessing that I had early onset Alzheimer's this was about 5 years ago. What that means when you're struggling through something like that, you're waking up in the morning and you might feel what people perceive as normal for a couple minutes until your body immediately remembers. And so you have some sort of thought that leads you to think, I'm going to die of Alzheimer's, or I'm going to kill myself before it gets really bad. And then what you're living with is just a terrible sense of anxiety and fear, essentially terror, because when you have OCD, those thoughts are facts. They are not just an idea. That is happening. And so imagine waking up in the morning and knowing that your brain is disintegrating. Anxiety lives in everyone differently. In my body, it absolutely lived in my chest. And what that meant was that I couldn't take deep breaths. You know, I tended, my breathing tended to be very shallow. Those who have had panic attacks recognize that when you have the symptoms of a panic attack, it tends to cause a panic attack. Right? Because you're like, oh no, I'm getting one. And then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. A lot of times you get tingling in your extremities and then just a terrible sense of doom and weight in my belly that feels like nausea. Those of us who are old enough remember when television would go off in the end of the night, we used to call it the ant races. And essentially it's just this constant fuzz. Do you remember the noise that it used to make?
Do TVs even do that anymore?
I don't know. And on the radio, what that's called is interference. And that's what it does. That's what that does in your head. It is an interference. It's a way to be, you cannot connect to thoughts. And so imagine if you're really struggling with something, like you just heard that someone in your family got a diagnosis, or you get a call from your doctor, you just got a mammogram. And you get a call from your doctor saying that they'd like for you to come in because they want to talk to you about it. That feeling that you get, imagine just walking around with that. And what happens then if your partner comes into the room and is like, do you remember, did I put my green sweater in a weird place? And you are needing to respond to them, right? But all that you have in your head is that doctor call. And so you can't even really remember what a green sweater is.
I am so struck by this while I'm listening to you speak, that that just living, that just going and doing what we're doing today, which is opening your Zoom and pressing on it and making sure that your hair is combed and thing, is such an enormous task for a person with anxiety, because everything is above and beyond that feeling that you just described, those symptoms, that overwhelming feeling that you're being sort of like taken away in your body. And here you are coping, sitting down and talking to us. An enormous amount of control is necessary to actually live a life with anxiety.
Control is such an interesting word to use, right? Because you just feel completely out of control. So everyone is living with anxiety right now. Susanna Mars, who's a great local singer performer, and she has a podcast, and she interviewed me, and she said, you know, I just read somewhere that the definition of anxiety is discomfort with uncertainty. And it was like, that's maybe the best description I've ever heard. Exactly. And it's what we're all going through right now. And I, in terms of control, like, you know, I initially, and continue to a little bit, just lost control. It turns out, after I've been doing some reading, there are people who respond to anxiety by what's called overfunctioning. And there are people who respond to anxiety by underfunctioning. And what I learned during COVID is I am an underfunctioning person. And so I don't know if you've seen this, but a lot of people have been posting things like, hey, can we normalize not responding to emails during this? Can we normalize like not getting back in touch with our friends, even though we desperately miss them? Because as an underfunctioning person, all you want to do, I have to tell you, Sheila, I have not in my life in the past, like, experienced so many times when I have quite literally wanted to crawl under my desk. I just wanted to crawl under my desk. That felt like the perfect response to all of this. Like, it just felt like it would be cozy down there. And like, I can't, you know what? I can't respond to your email. I am under my desk.
I so agree with you. And I always like to look at people's background, and you have a very cool sign that says, this is some serious bull crap. And I really would like you to print that for me and send it to me, because I've thought myself, Courtney, that people who weren't reacting like that maybe have something wrong with them a little bit. I mean, honestly, I'm saying that in all seriousness. Like, if you haven't had a day or maybe even a week where you haven't come to some sort of existential crisis about who we are and how we're living, then I don't think you're paying much attention. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Well, and I think that, but I think self-delusion is a tactic, right? I mean, self-delusion is a way for us to continue surviving in this world, And so
number one in Courtney's toolbox, self-delusion.
Oh my gosh. I mean, but I think that that's what those people are doing. It's either, as you say, they're not paying attention, or they're not thinking about what's going on, or it's a form of self-delusion. And I have to say, so my sign does say that. And it did say that. It's one of those signs that you see all the time on influencers, Instagrams, and they all have inspiring quotes on them. And this is my version of that. This is an under-functioner's inspiring quote. Everyone needs to realize there is no moral value to either of these responses. And I want everyone to recognize that and have some self-compassion.
Yeah.
I love that. Your friend, you know what she did in March? She bought a barn and she completely renovated it, and she turned it into a home for underprivileged yoga goats or whatever. Good for her. Yay for her. That's her response to this. But it's not yours. You're a very different person. We all have various abilities to cope, and there's no moral value to any of them.
I am with you, man. I honestly have felt like if we could have more of these conversations, that people wouldn't be self-reporting such high rates of anxiety and depression. If we said, this is the time where a lot of us want to be under our desk or not getting out of our beds, and we are actually not accomplishing anything in the course of a day, maybe people wouldn't feel so guilty about the idea that they're supposed to be so productive right now. That to me is a skill, to be able to recognize that I really do want to come sit underneath my desk and not do a lot today. It's actually a coping skill, and I think it's a good one. But you have developed so many other coping skills to actually deal with your anxiety in a way that I think would be helpful for other people to hear. So could you go through some of those?
I want to preface this by saying that I haven't dealt well with in the past few months. I have used my tool set, right, to deal with the thoughts as they come in. But I have to say that I'm struggling. And I want everybody to know that, because I don't want them to think that I want to be honest about that. I'm still struggling every day through this. So I think, first of all, the recognition that I was an underfunctioner, and then starting to use some of those self-compassion skills. I think if you struggle with anxiety and you are either an under or an overfunctioner, then one of the skills that you can use is to reset your expectations, or just one of the ideas, right, is to reset. Once you do that, then you're not constantly feeling shame, right? If you listen to all these people who are telling you that you should do all these things, then you're setting yourself up to feel shame. Yeah. So I think that's a huge part of once you recognize that you're struggling with this, is to reset those expectations and recognize, and also reset the expectations of not only the people around you, but the people at your work. I think that you have to recognize there are some businesses that you're in where it's not okay to say, I need a mental health day. But if you're in a company that recognizes that, just letting them know, today I'm just really struggling, and I think that I need to take a day, and here's what my workload is, and here's how I think that it's going to be okay if I do this tomorrow. What happens when you fight anxiety is that you tighten up your body even more, and it actually makes it worse. So the first thing that I would say is to name it. So if,
Yeah.
and you might feel dumb doing this, but just say it out loud. My chest is really tight right now. And what that does is it sort of takes you out of your brain and allows you to just gives you a little bit of perspective on your own body, and also recognizes that tightness in your chest is all it is, and it might not mean anything. It is a sensation in your body. And sometimes we have no idea why our body does this. But the tough thing about anxiety is that our culture's always said, trust your gut. Trust your gut. Oh, your body knows, right? Sometimes your body doesn't know shit.
Yeah.
Anxiety is the ultimate unreliable narrator, right?
Yeah.
That's what's so difficult, is that when you have anxiety, you can't trust your body. You can't trust, and you can't even necessarily trust your thoughts. And the thing is, whether or not you have anxiety, you can't necessarily trust your thoughts. We have about 75,000 of them a day. Most of them are meaningless. My favorite metaphor for this is a dog sitting at the side of a road watching cars go by. You have 75,000 cars going by. And I think that you've spoken to Anna Debenham. She has an amazing nonprofit in Portland called the Insight Alliance, and she helps a lot of imprisoned people to sort of get out of the prison that's in their head. One of my favorite phrases that she uses is your brain's special effects team. So you have a thought and it's just sitting there, and then your brain's special effects team gets a hold of it. And it just grabs on. It's like, oh, and you know what? This is just like that thing your mom said when you were 5. And this is just, oh my God. And you could die of this probably. Your brain special effects team grows it and grows it and grows it. If you grab onto it and you think that it has some meaning. But if you're the dog by the side of the road, you could either grab on to one of those cars with your mouth and get dragged and be bloody, or you could watch it go by, because it doesn't mean anything. Like, it doesn't mean anything unless you give it meaning. And that's a huge help for people with anxiety, is recognizing that we are creating these stories in our head.
Yeah, I'm the dog that would chase it going 90 miles per hour and never catch it, and just follow it around and around and around like a greyhound and a rabbit. I'm not kidding you. That's what it felt like to me. To your point, Courtenay, about I wish we could name it. When at the beginning of quarantine, when all of these people were in the stores and they're buying up toilet paper, I felt like yelling to the sky, name your anxiety. Because really, all of that hoarding, all of that doing, all of that bread making, and all of that busyness was all about trying to quell anxiety. And I kept wondering, like, is anybody going to say this to people, or is this the more honorable way of dealing with anxiety?
Of course our culture does that, right? It's so much better to do. It's so much better to get stuff done. You have to be productive.
Yeah.
You're applying a moral value to it. You know what's good? Surviving. Surviving is good. Like, and sometimes that's as much as we can do.
Medication for antidepressants and anti-anxiety is up 60% in America since the beginning of COVID, 60%. So it is clear that people are really struggling. And I also think it's fascinating to me the way that you have eliminated a ton of the stigma around taking medicine to help deal with these kind of problems. So talk to people a little bit about the journey that you've had on just trying to find the right mix of medication that worked for you.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I'm still struggling with that. You know, I had a series of about 5 months where I was having intrusive thought OCD. It was about a year and a half ago. What ended up working for me was Prozac. And one of the things that we know about SSRIs that we talk about, the majority of the people who take them, it takes away their sex drive. I don't know if that's being discussed quite enough. I think that it's something that people just agree to. They just say, I'm willing to trade that. Yeah. And I think that for me, because I wasn't sexually active until a lot later in life, and I was a fan. And I
Yeah.
think that
We all are.
that was really, well, yeah. And there are some people who honestly, and so many women who are postmenopausal can take it or leave it. So for them, it's like, it's fine. It's, it's not like anything has changed. I'm willing to make that trade. Like, of course, I'm going to trade not being able to reach orgasm for thinking that I'm going to die every day. I'm absolutely willing to trade that. More and more, what I'm really hoping that comes out of this situation, and the fact that so many Americans are struggling with anxiety and more people are going on these medications, is that the stigma of getting help and taking medications will be taken away. I keep talking about moral value. There are people who assign moral value to being able to deal with your mental illness without taking drugs.
Yeah. Right.
Fuck that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not to do swearsies, but that makes me, I cannot tell you how angry it makes me when anyone assigns a moral value to anyone struggling with a mental illness and who just needs to get by. Whatever you need to do to survive every day is absolutely okay.
We'll be right back with more Chasing Chaos after this brief message.
Chasing Chaos supports the bold mission of NAMI Clackamas. The National Alliance on Mental Illness is a grassroots organization dedicated to improving the quality of life for everyone impacted by mental health issues through support, education, and advocacy. One of the many things that makes NAMI unique are its robust classes and support groups delivered entirely by trained volunteers with lived experience. Join other generous folks like you who share NAMI's vision of hope, health, acceptance, and the well-being of our community. Learn more about their life-changing programs and give now at namicc.org/chasingchaos.
I thought what you did in your book, okay, fine, whatever, you can hold it up for people, please, and so they can see the brilliant cover. It's so cool. I wore a shirt to match. You did it really in a very comical way, kind of exposure therapy. You took things you were deeply afraid of and you immersed yourself in them. But I always wondered after reading it, was there an experience you didn't keep in? Was there something that happened that was so uncomfortable and so weird that you actually didn't include it in the book?
I think there wasn't, because I put in the weirdest experiences that I had, because those were the hardest to write about. I think that, I mean, that's the thing. It wasn't like absolutely insane stuff, but it was definitely insane for a person who struggles with anxiety. And like the professional cuddler, I just don't like talking to strangers. So cuddling with a stranger was just beyond. And especially, again, with a weight problem, that was really difficult.
It's fascinating to me that you went on 28 dates, but you also met the love of your life. And I'm curious how COVID has impacted that love and that union, because as we all know, people are saviors for our mental health, and they're also what exacerbate it madly. So how is that going? I have never lived with a romantic partner, and I'm 52 years old. No moral value to that. Just fighting that thought, or just no sort of value. Like, you're not a freak. It's fine. You're not a freak. So he bought this wonderful mid-century house, and we moved in December of last year. And then COVID happened in mid-March, and I was just learning to live with a romantic partner. And here's what happened is that I cannot live with someone 24/7. I can't. Yeah. I've just realized that. And and this is again something that I think, if you have anxiety, I think that we tend to sometimes dismiss our fears, or you're just like, oh, you're overthinking this and everything is fine. Talk to people, talk to a therapist, talk to your friends. I think that my curiosity saved me in this case, because I talked to a bunch of friends. And here's what I would like to normalize. I would like to normalize loving someone and not being able to live with them 24/7 for the rest of your life. Here. And I had this idea with a friend of mine who was also really struggling with this.
And it was to get an apartment that we essentially, all of the women who were losing their freaking minds, timeshare.
What? How did I not get invited to this? Huh?
Well, that's the thing. We haven't done it yet. But that was the thing. And the way that I talked to my friend about it, I was like, so I have this idea, and it's either genius or it's a harbinger of doom for my relationship. And I talk to women about it, and their eyes just widen in there, and they say the same thing. They're like, "Where's the list? Can I get on the list?" But I have to tell you, Sheila, I don't know how many conversations you've had with people, but it was really hard for me to find people who normalized that. And we're like, oh yeah, it's really hard.
I come from a family where my sister and her partner bought condos next to one another. My parents routinely took 2-week breaks apart from each other just to say we want to keep our relationship fresh. I completely agree with you, Courtenay, that these kind of realities have to be brought up. They have to be actually be discussed in kind of an open and honest realm. And it's not that we don't love the people deeply or they don't love us. It's just that human beings aren't meant to be together this much. We are not meant to be together this much.
It's funny because I've talked to my partner about it, because I've said, I mean, aren't you being driven crazy because you have no privacy or solitude? And he's just like, I'm good. Like it's not something that he needs. And that's normal too. Like he goes down, we have a basement. We're very lucky. Like we have an office, and, I recognize that. Like I recognize how lucky you are, but I cannot live without solitude. There's something about, and I think this speaks to shame. I have a lot when I'm doing something that I feel like the TikTok obsession. Some days I just want to lie in bed and watch TikTok. And there are things that I do where I don't want to be observed. Like he'll pop into the room and he's like, "Hey, TikTok girl." And I'm like, "Don't talk about it. I'm so ashamed of it."
I love that you brought it up, Courtenay, because what it says to me is that if you really cope with who you are in a really authentic way, and you're brutally honest with yourself about what you really need to be happy, it can improve your mental health. It really can. And I think a lot of people have really terrible mental health problems because they're trying to please other people. They're trying to be in other bodies. They're trying to be someone they're really not. So I'm hoping that resonates, especially with women who want the key to your damn apartment. Just like, I want some of that timeshare action. I have been curious to ask you this question since I've known you. Do you feel like your humor in some ways saved your life?
I would say absolutely. I mean, I think that it saves a lot of us. There are those of us who sort of have this. It's a language that we have kind of with our friends, and there are people that I've known who use humor to avoid talking about difficult things. But the people that I know use humor to talk more deeply sometimes about things that are difficult. The wonderful thing about teaching your brain to see absurdity is that oftentimes things that are absurd make us really angry. And to figure out a way to see ridiculous things as absurd as opposed to frustrating or having humiliating things happen in your life. I feel so incredibly lucky that I have taught my brain to seek out the absurd in these stories and to find humor in them, because it helps me to reframe them. And reframing, as we know, right? Reframing helps us to look at our life in a different way and in a more positive way. And, and I always say in my classes, if we believe that we are made up of our stories and we can go back and see a story in a different way and see a story in a way that feeds us better, then we're literally changing our life, and that's extremely powerful. So I feel like it absolutely has.
I'm always just completely moved after I talk with you, Courtenay. Thank you for doing this so much. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Chasing Chaos. Tune in next time to hear more stories like Courtenay's and find genuine answers on your path to well-being. I'm your host, Sheila Hamilton, and I hope you stay strong.
Join other big-hearted people like you who support our mental health community. Give now by clicking on the Facebook donate button or visit namicc.org/chasingchaos. Get the latest tools and resources to manage your well-being. Plus, learn how to keep safe, get tested, and where to be immunized for COVID. Visit namicc.org. We hope you'll share this episode of Chasing Chaos with your friends. Tag your posts with Chasing Chaos. Join us next month for a riveting conversation about the wild ride of unemployment and how to get back on your feet again with career expert and CEO of JobJenny.com, Jenny Foss. See the schedule at namicc.org. Have a question about anxiety, OCD, or where to find COVID resources? Stick around for a few minutes and chat with NAMI or others in the community right here on Facebook. And while you're still with us, remember, you can help others retake command of their lives. Make a donation to fund NAMI's life-changing classes, support groups, and programs. Every dollar makes an impact. Just click the Facebook donate button or visit namicc.org/chasingchaos. Thanks again for watching. Stay strong.